All right. Today is the day that we try to find some motivation to get this process complete. I've not been able to find the motivation. I'm not even going to lie. I'm here as a PME instructor, as a major in the United States Air Force. Yes, I am active duty. Yes, I do have a beard. Yes, I'm on a shaving waiver. Yes, I know all of the stigma attached. Yes, I do have a condition. Yes, it's called pseudofolliculitis Barbie. You can look on my neck and you can kind of see some of the scarring and the bumps and all of that stuff that go along with the condition. Now that we got that out the way, um, I'm here to motivate myself and maybe even motivate someone else if I do in the future decide to turn this into a public series. It's unlisted right now. That means someone, if they're savvy enough, they could find it. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, background. It's all of the lithos from the bases that I've been to. Now, there's three lithos, but you see California, Oklahoma, California, Colorado, South Carolina. So clearly, I didn't get a litho from Colorado, and I didn't get a litho from South Carolina. Um, I'll just kind of let that, be what it is. Uh, Next, going to the introduction. All right, and this is just if you like reading um, or audio reading. The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. This is from The Art of War, Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, 544 to 496 BC. So many, many years ago. I don't know whether war is an interlude during peace or peace an interlude during war. George Clemenceau, uh, probably not pronounced properly, Clemenceau, uh, Prime Minister of France, 1917 to 1920. No topic can have greater relevance to a military professional than that of war. While the global war on terrorism and the transformation of warfare have led some to question the traditional concept of war, most experts would probably agree with the classic war theorist Karl von Clausewitz that the fundamental nature of war remains constant. This addresses war as a concept along with its unchanging nature through the eyes of Clausewitz. Though the nature of war is unchanging, the character and conduct of war do change. This lesson explores this unchanging nature, its complexity, and how military thinkers have interacted with the complexity while waging war. Next. What? Wow. Not sure what happened. It's okay. All right. Next, the complexities of war. The art of war is simple enough. Find out where your enemy is, get at him as soon as you can, strike him as hard as you can, and keep moving on. Ulysses S. Grant, commanding general of the United States Army and the 18th president of the United States. That's two after Abraham Lincoln, 1869 through 1877. In war, events of importance are the result of trivial causes. Julius Caesar, Roman general, 100 BC to 44 BC. And you'll notice kind of a recurring theme amongst these quotes so far. All, um, well, that's a lie. See, Sun Tzu is not considered white, although Asians now, technically, I saw somewhere they are considered white now. But anyway, Sun Tzu was Asian. The rest of them are of European descent. Ah, when warfare theorists first approached their subject, they identified an initial need to be reductive, to offer a straightforward answer for what this practice was and why mankind engaged in it. The answers classical theorists came up with were remarkably similar across time and space. The classic military thinker Sun Tzu, tackling the subject from ancient China during a period of turbulence in state building, approached warfare as of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. 2,000 years later, Karl von Clausewitz, often viewed as the preeminent Western observer of the nature of war, echoed those words of his predecessor, claiming that war is not merely an act of policy, but a true political instrument, a continuation of political intercourse carried on with other means. To this day, current United States doctrine builds off of these forebears, noting war itself is an instrument of policy, and victory in war cannot be defined by casualties or destruction, but by the survival of the state and the achievement of policy objectives. And there's a picture of Karl von Clausewitz. I believe he was a Prussian uh, officer. I'm not sure what rank when he came up with his paper, but the source of the picture is from Wikimedia Commons. While these answers certainly tell scholars, policymakers, and warfighters why they are engaging in war, they only scratch the surface of war and its practice. From this simple starting point, the subject of war and warfighting takes on an extraordinary complexity, with this complex nature remaining essentially timeless even as the character of wars and conflicts change. Now, Ulysses S. Grant said it was pretty simple. You just find where your enemy is and you get at him and you hit him as hard as you can. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if that is what we're doing today. I think today we're more so doing um, each state or nation has its own objectives. There's the reason why they went to war, and the the prosecution of war is to compel, because the other political means that you tried to use, they failed. So now you have um, other means like was previously stated. Um, yeah, you have other means. So you basically kill and make the situation as unpleasant as you can for your opponent or your enemy. And at whatever point your enemy decides continuing this is no longer advantageous for us, and so we're going to go ahead and um, we're going to sue for peace, or we're going to surrender, and whatever the original victor, or the victor, whatever it is that they were seeking originally, they're going to get it. And that's my understanding of war. You kind of force people through acts of violence to do what it is that you want them to do. And it's not always the one with the most numbers that wins, but the one that can cause the most disruption to um, everyday life. That's what it seems like to me. Just kind of viewing um, Japan, World War II, Japan. So you had the use of that atom bomb, and they dropped one bomb, and they said, we're going to keep fighting. And then they said, cool, we'll drop another one. After they dropped the second one, it was um, understood that continuing to do this was not going to be, or it was going to be too painful. So I think war completes when it's too painful to continue, or when it's, yeah, too painful to continue. I think that's when war stops. Um, yeah. And pain not being like the sense of emotional pain or anything, but when it's obvious to the enemy that continuing this no longer serves the purpose or the need of the state. I'd be interested to look at the perception and the views of the losers, because history is often told by the winner, and I'd be interested to hear kind of what happens after a loss. Um, I know we technically, on paper, we say the United States has never lost a war, but clearly Vietnam was not a success. And you could also argue that the Afghanistan war um, was also not a success. They were able to defeat the enemy, um, and George Bush, son Bush, famously was on an aircraft carrier where they had mission accomplished like a few days later. I think that might have even been Iraq, so don't quote me on that. But even the Iraq war was not necessarily a success. You toppled a regime, but what did we go in there for, and what did it accomplish? And so, kind of bridging on to the next topic, you have um, war and you have objectives in that war. And so, is it possible for two opposing sides to have objectives and accomplish both of their objectives and both come out as winners? That's probably a different question for a different day. Anyway, back to the reading. Um, Sorry for that long digression. I do that. Clausewitz explored this complex nature throughout his magisterial work, Vom Krieg, or On War. In it, Clausewitz conceptualizes war as a contest between two opponents, a duel on a massive scale to impel an opponent to do our will. So, kind of like what I was saying. Required to achieve effects on this scale, though, is the coordinated effort of a multitude of individual human contests and achievements. At its heart, although war is a contest, it is invariably also a fundamentally human endeavor. This helps to define the unchanging nature of the conflict as the aggregate expression of human nature itself is unchanging. So humans pretty much don't change, but conflict and the nature of conflict is what changes. And I think that's probably driven by technology. In that ultimately warfare is a human endeavor, Clausewitz in turn identifies key characteristics of war as products of its human nature. Underpinning all military endeavors is what is referred to as the Clausewitzian Trinity. This concept explains that Clausewitz saw as a paradox with the human element of war that war was essentially bound by primordial violence, chance, and reason, and that these three elements were always in contestation with one another through the waging of war. However, ultimately, the comprehension and management of all three were necessary components of successfully prosecuting conflicts. What in the world does all that mean? So you have to have primordial violence, chance, and reason to be managed to be successful. Okay. All right. Sure, it makes sense to him. Clausewitz also attempted to understand the limitations imposed in war by human nature. He observed that decisions must be made with fundamentally incomplete information, that there would always be unknowns in human endeavors. This was compounded by the human capacity for error. Even as a commander ordered actions during a campaign, human error could and would easily undermine the strategy and tactics that had been planned. These two factors are now commonly called fog and friction. And I see the um, inability to execute the strategy and tactics as they have been planned. I see that as kind of like Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so nations will exercise and run what they're going to do and how they think the enemy is going to respond. But the fact is you don't know how your enemy is going to respond. You have different cultures, you have different histories, and you have different motivating factors. When a nation practices or doesn't exercise, usually it's that nation exercising against the nation. And so you have one side pretending to be the enemy, and then you have the other side being the the nation. And so the nation only knows how its opponent has acted in the past. It doesn't necessarily know how it will act in the future. And it doesn't necessarily know all of the pressure points of that opponent. So I just think that's interesting. Finally, Clausewitz also identified two major ways of prosecuting war. Given that war itself was a deadly contest, Clausewitz recognized that all measures could likely be justified in the waging of war to achieve the desired policies. He referred to this sort of unfettered war as absolute war. However, Clausewitz also recognized that as a human endeavor intended to reach policy goals, war ultimately required some limitations. These limitations might be on the amount of resources allocated to the conflict, the policy goals involved in the conflict itself, or even the methods by which the war was prosecuted. In any of these cases, the war was no longer an absolute war, but a limited war. Following the horrors of early modern war, specifically the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, which was prosecuted as an absolute war, new interests arose in limiting war and its effects. The widespread depopulation of several regions of the Holy Roman Empire, Europe, and the atrocities visited upon all sides of the conflict led the learned men of the day to discuss the idea of limiting through war through a series of philosophical explorations. And so now notice it says learned men. So that means there must be some unlearned men. And in my mind, that's probably happening along color lines. I don't have any proof of that, but I just, because it stresses Holy Roman Empire. And so white men. But it's just the language of the military science. Let's face it, this country was based on white men being in power, aka white supremacy. A Hugo Grotius, a Dutch jurist, argued for restraint in warfare based on natural law as opposed to church law. Church law, hey man, we just gonna wipe you out, just like in the Judeo-Christian um, tradition, when um, God told the people or the children of Israel to wipe out um, a country or a people, he said, get rid of everything. It was basically genocide. You're going to kill the people, you're going to kill the animals, you're going to everything, total war. And so they said that, and that's church law. You know, we're not doing that. We're not just going to service the wrath and the judgment of God and kill everybody. We're going to do it on a limited basis until we can get you to surrender. Then we'll stop waging the war. Hugo Grotius' influential ideas led into a school of thought called just war theory. Since then, the philosophical explorations of the just war thinkers have been expanded to include just ad bellum, justice of going to war, just in bello, justice in war, and just post bellum, justice after war. These concepts have in turn become the foundation of the laws of war. In the video below, renowned political philosopher Michael Walzer provides a brief overview of just war theory, including the concepts of just ad bellum, just in bello, and just post bellum. After watching the video, ponder the following points. Where does Walzer's tradition of just war come from? Does it matter where these concepts originated? Note, if the video will not play, you can view it here. Appearances of advertisements on this YouTube account do not imply endorsement by the E School of Graduate PME. So that is something that probably needs to be updated, as we are no longer called the E School of Graduate PME, but we are the Global College of PME. So probably should write that down somewhere. I'm not. Anyway, Michael Walz's video, watch it. Right now. Then there's required reading materials. Clausewitz on War, 1989 translation. Read pages 75 through 89, 119 through 121, and 595 through 600. Clausewitz on War remains a central touchstone for understanding the nature and character of war. The selection or the selected passages offer key insights into his explorations that will help students in their own understanding of military operations. As you read Clausewitz, reflect on how his analysis or conflict remains relevant. Point to ponder. Is there truly an unchanging nature? Zoo, Su, The Art of War, 1963 translation. Read chapters 1, 3, 5, 6, and 9. Sun Tzu's classic work on war strategy and tactics offers a deceptively deep discussion of the complexity of human conflict. As you read these sections, reflect on how these selections apply to modern warfighting and the current military challenges of the United States. In addition, compare the insights of Sun Tzu to those of Clausewitz. Points to ponder. Whose philosophical framework is more compelling? Xi, China at Arms, Millennial Strategic Traditions and Their Diplomatic Implications, 2015. Read pages 201 through 223. This reading directly connects Chinese thinking on Sun Tzu and Clausewitz to modern Chinese grand strategy, and even more importantly, is written by one of the most important strategic thinkers in all of contemporary China. Points to ponder. What do you make Xi's argument that Chinese grand strategy is shifting in tendency from that of Sun Tzu to that of Clausewitz? To learn more, Cook, Ethical Issues in War. Osh, Cotelius Arthasastra. Zhu, Tzu, The Art of War, 1963 translation. Joshi, Strategic Wisdom from the Orient, Evaluating the Contemporary Relevance of Cotelius Arthasastra and Sun Tzu's Art of War. Page 3, The Levels of War. In war, the chief incalculable is the human will, which manifests itself in resistance, which in turn lies in the province of tactics. Strategy has not to overcome resistance. Except from nature, its purpose is to diminish the possibility of resistance, and it seeks to fulfill this purpose by exploiting the elements of movement and surprise. B.H. Liddell Hart, military historian and strategist, 1895 to 1970. The complexity of warfare is not only due to the human element involved in its waging. Warfare harnesses the efforts of hundreds of thousands, even millions of people who struggle for the political objectives the state is pursuing. See? So it's all about what are we trying to get after. And you have a mass of men and women that are all trying to push the objectives of the state. And what I find interesting is you don't have all of those people that are involved in the pursuing of that the state interest. They don't actually benefit from the conflict. And so what's interesting to me is you will have like look in Civil War or look in Vietnam or look at any of these wars. Look at the black man and the plight of the black man. Even in the Revolutionary War, every war that the U.S. has fought, blacks have been involved in fighting and prosecuting these wars, even when they were not fighting for the same things. In the Revolutionary War, they were fighting for the right to kind of be separated from the British Empire. And meanwhile, you had the British Empire offering freedom to blacks. Like, hey, man, you guys fight for us. We win, we set you free. And so you had some choosing that side, and their loyalty really led to whoever could get them what it was that they were trying to get. And so I just think it's interesting that often you have the people that are prosecuting the actual folks that are prosecuting, and the ones that are sending people to die. Often they do not benefit the same from the outcome of the war, but they still fight and prosecute that war. I think that's very interesting. Um, the complexity of warfare is not only due to the human element involving its waging. Waging a warfare harnesses the efforts of hundreds of thousands, even millions of people who struggle for the political objectives the state is pursuing. Those efforts range from individual and small unit tasks to coordinating military actions across hundreds of miles. To conceptualize this, military thinkers have delineated what are known as the levels of war. These levels are the tactical, the operational, and the strategic. The tactical level of war is the lowest level of war, where individual actions occur. Officers approaching or at field grade level, that's me, will be most familiar with the tactical level because almost all their experience will have been in tactical actions. The operational level of war is a more recent concept, having come into usage during the Second World War. The scale of warfare had expanded to require a newly understood level beyond tactical actions and strategic ones. This led to the conceptualizing of the operational level of war, serving as the pivot point between tactics and strategy. Next question for me is, all right, so warfare has changed since the Second World War. You have the um, what do you call it? Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, which has changed the scope of warfare greatly. You can see in this Ukrainian and Russian conflict that the Ukraine has been utilizing ISR with the help of NATO and its constituents, and also just kind of their own ability to leverage um, drones with the use of artillery, and they've kind of created a new type of warfare. So I'm interested to see if the tactical operational level and the tactical and operational and strategic are the only levels that we're seeing, or is there a new level of warfare that is developing? That's kind of interesting to me. I guess we'll see that, and we'll understand that as brains talk about this conflict and future conflicts. Since the operational level of war is seen as the bridge linking tactical successes to strategic goals, it involves a great deal of complexity. The operational level is the purview of most field grade and general officers. This course will revisit the operational level of war at much greater length in Lesson 2 Conventional War. The strategic level is the highest level of purely military action. It is where broad military capabilities and potential actions are analyzed to create a goal to bring military operations to a successful conclusion. The strategic level of war is usually the domain of specific general officers, such as combatant or joint force commanders. However, officers of all ranks must develop operational and tactical plans of course or courses of action with the strategic level in mind. That is such a hard word for me. Strategic. Strategic. It becomes like SH. Strategic. While the results of tactical actions and operations will drive variance in strategy, the the strategic level must always guide the objectives of tactical and operational plans. Practitioners of the military art must understand how strategy is formulated so that they grasp not only the strategic goals of military operations. That seems like an incomplete thought. Practitioners of the military art must understand how strategy is formulated so that they grasp not only the strategic goal of military operations. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to go ahead and note that as well. In the US military, the creation of strategy typically refers to the analysis and balancing through the model of ends, ways, and means. The ends refer to the military goals that are desired. What do we want in the end? The ways are the planned operations to achieve those goals. How do we get there? And the means are the military forces available to carry out those operations. So, who's going to get us there? How do we get there? And what are we looking for? All right. And then there's a drag the items from the bottom slot on the right. Strategic. I feel like I did this already. Okay. Campaigns designed to accomplish Strategic goals within theaters. This is the strategic level. Oh, wrong. Okay. Operational level. All right. Campaigns designed to accomplish strategic goals within theaters. Major operations that's strategic to orchestrate tactical successes. Wrong. Operational. Yeah. The U.S. determines security objectives, uses resources to achieve desired end states. That is strategic. Wait, what? Strategic. Effects at this level impair the adversary's ability to carry out war. That is strategic. Where individuals battle, where individual battles and engagements are fought. Tactical. Next, the interaction of the levels of war. Strategic at the top, operational, the second level, and tactical, that's on the ground. National policy, theater strategy, and campaigns are all function on the strategic level. Next, you have at the operational level major operations, and on the tactical level, you have battles, engagements, and small unit and crew action. National policy, restore the government of Kuwait using military force. That sounds like an end, because that's what you want. Theater strategy, destroy the Iraqi army south of the Euphrates. These are all like goals, it sounds like. Campaigns, Operation Desert Storm. Major operations. The Third Army attacks to destroy the Republican Guard. The 7th Corps attacks the Iraqi 12th Corps and the Republican Guard. Second ACR engages Tawakalna, Tawakalna Division of 70 or at 73rd Easting. I can't read. M1A1 tank engages and destroys 6 T-72s. I'm guessing those are Russian tanks, just because they like to use T. I'm not sure what it stands for, but whatever. The levels of war, although they seem straightforward, are the sources of a great deal of complexity. While it is easy to conceptualize a military strategy determining its operations, in reality it is not so simple. While the strategic goals associated with a nation's effort will rarely change, the levels of war are constantly interacting during military campaigns, operations, and battles. Dozens of tactical decisions support success at the operational level, and any single one could cement success or force failure. Failure at the operational level could change the ends, ways, and means calculus used to generate the strategy. There will also be a feedback loop throughout the levels as a military achieves success or failure, with each of these elements in turn interacting with the human element described above. While field grade officers focus primarily on the operational level of war, it is important that practitioners at that level understand and consistently contextualize it within the strategic and perhaps even grand strategic level. This is even more critical given that actions at the operational level will always form the pivot point between tactical actions and the larger strategic vision created by military leadership or even the political leadership of the nation, the president. The range of military operations. Concurrent to the levels of war, there is also the range of military operations, or ROMO. The ROMO is intended to encompass all of the operations that a modern military might undertake and through the conflict continuum from peace to war. On one end tend to be active combat engagements, such as large scale conventional campaigns and wars, while towards the other end, there tends to be activities such as peacekeeping, war termination, disarmament, and humanitarian assistance. The structure of this course will guide the students through several aspects of the ROMO, from direct combat operations to war termination and peacekeeping. While exploring the course material, remember that even as you examine different military activities, all aspects of the ROMO intersect with the levels of war, meaning that even extremely different concepts such as conventional combat operations and peacekeeping will both be best understood if they are examined at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels. Required materials like defining military strategy. Read pages 183 to 186. The model of U.S. military strategy that Like defines has become the standard for the U.S. military. Like not only breaks down the elements of creating strategy, but shows how these elements are connected even when creating a military strategy that fits national objectives. Is Like's model universal? If not, what are some situations where the creation of strategy diverges from this model? Jablonski, Strategy and the Operational Level of War, Part 1, 1987. Read pages 65 through 76. In this article, Jablonski discusses the levels of war using historical examples to illustrate the constant interaction between the operational and strategic levels, thereby highlighting the importance of thinking of strategy in terms of ends, ways, and means. Points to ponder. Given Jablonski's formulation, which do you think is the most important level of war to consider? Why? To learn more, Eberhard, Grand Strategy of the United States, a study of the process, 2009, read pages 1 through 50. Finally, you should now comprehend the nature and character of war, the numerous factors that influence the prosecution of armed conflict, the levels at which war is fought, and how all of these complexities in turn define the difficulty of creating both military and national strategies. Subsequent lessons will move on to examine the ways in which war is prosecuted, while keeping in mind that each of these methods involves its own interaction with the human element, levels of war, and even the necessity of strategic planning. This concludes Lesson 1, The Nature of War. So, a few readings to do. Um, Ultimately, you just kind of personally, my approach to it is I'm not going to read all of that stuff. I'll probably read the um, like the Sun Tzu and the Clausewitz. Read that stuff just because you're going to have to write on it. You already know when you get to if there's a facilitated course, you're going to have to write on it. Or at the end of this um, lesson, you're probably going to have some sort of quiz or something, or some sort of um, yellow dig post that you have to write, and it helps to be able to have a source to kind of speak from, because your opinion is nice, but they actually want to grade you based on your ability to understand and apply critical thinking to the readings, the selected material. It's cool if you use outside material. Just make sure you cite the proper reference, and um, make sure your argument is cohesive and it makes sense. So that's it.